Έχουμε τη χαρά να προχωρήσουμε σε ένα digital συνέδριο για το ελληνικό κρασί και θα προσπαθήσουμε να καλύψουμε αρκετά από τα θέματα που απασχολούν και θα απασχολήσουν το ελληνικό κρασί τα επόμενα χρόνια. Άρα εδώ δεν έχουμε μια γευσηγνωσία, έχουμε κάτι πολύ πιο σύνθετο και ελπίζω ουσιαστικό. Τα θέματα που επιλέξαμε είναι από τα πιο καυτά για το ελληνικό κρασί. Φυσικά θα μπορούσε να πει κάποιος ότι υπάρχουν και άλλα, όπως η αειφορική διαχείριση, οι προκλήσεις της κλιματικής αλλαγής, και σίγουρα υπάρχουν. Πρόσφατα να κάνω μια παρένθεση, ολοκληρώθηκε και η διάσκεψη για την αλλαγή του κλίματος στην Γλασκόβη, το COP26, που από ό,τι διάβασα διατηρεί και τον στόχο περιορισμού της παγκόσμιας θέρμανσης στον 1,5 βαθμό που είχε τεθεί και με το Παρίσι, αλλά αυτά μπορούμε να τα δούμε μελλοντικά σε κάθε περίπτωση. Έχουμε λοιπόν, για να σας κατευθύνω, 2 μέρη. 12 με 3 είναι το πρώτο μέρος και έχει 3 sessions. Στο πρώτο, ο Φερνάντο Μόρα είναι ο πρώτος προσκεκλημένος, μετά συνεχίζω εγώ, μιλάμε για τα παλαιά αμπέλια. Στο δεύτερο μέρος, ο πασίγνωστος συγγραφέας και γενετιστής Ζωζέ Βουγιαμός, μαζί με τον καθηγητή Κουνδουρά, παίρνουν τη σκητάλη για να μιλήσουν για τις αυτόχθονες ποικιλίες και στο τέλος όλα αυτά που είπαμε θα τα δούμε από ένα νομοθετικό πρίσμα μαζί με 2 εκπροσώπους του Σύνδεσμου Ελληνικού Ίνου, τον καθηγητή Γεωργόπουλο, που είναι ο διευθυντής του ΣΕΟ, και τον Γιάννη Βογιατζή, που είναι ο πρόεδρος του ΣΕΟ. Άρα λοιπόν έχουμε, πιστεύω, τους σωστούς ανθρώπους να μας λύσουν όλες τις απορίες. Πριν ξεκινήσουμε και δώσω το λόγο στον Φερνάντο Μόρα, να πω ότι είμαστε σε μορφή webinar, που σημαίνει ότι μας βλέπετε, δεν σας βλέπουμε, ούτε σας ακούμε. Μπορείτε να μας ρωτήσετε ό,τι θέλετε στο section που λέει πάνω Q&A και θα προσπαθήσω να τα απαντάω όλα live και να ευχαριστήσω το Σελήνη που είναι ο χορηγός μας και να πω ότι το conference τελεί υπό την αιγίδα του Wines of Greece. Λοιπόν, and now is the time to give the stage and present Fernando Mora MW. Fernando, the stage is yours. You can open the camera. Fernando is a master of wine from Spain. He is a winemaker with Bodegas Frontonio, and he works with old vines. Fernando, I'm very happy to see you.
Thank you very much. For me, it's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And if you're ready, you can share your presentation and you can start. I will try to moderate it, and if there are questions during your speech, I can try and present them to you. Excellent. Let's go.
So let me start. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about our job in Spain, in the northeast part of Spain, and especially talking about old vines. For me, old vines are part of my DNA. Probably one of the most important things in viticulture that we have in Spain are old vines. There is always a dilemma, and people don't know exactly why old vines are making better wines. I present a question, but actually I know very well, because I have worked for long with young and old vines, that old vines produce better wines, at least in the way that I understand old vines. So the first question is that it's very difficult to know what really means old vines, because it's not regulated in the world. Only in few countries, like South Africa, for example, now some parts of Australia, they are regulating what old vines means, and they are creating a hierarchy of old wines, no? So for me, wines, old wines are should be older than 25, 30 years old, is when they are mature, they have developed all the radicular, aerial and radicular and aerial part. But it's under discussion if this is enough, or if old vines are more than 40 years, 100 years. The main things that we have in old vines is that they produce less grapes, probably in part because the vigor is decreased. The viruses affected these vines also decreasing the vigor. The rootstock is fully developed, and this is mainly always good for making more stable vintages, even if it's a big drought or if it's too much rain. No? The vines are more established and they are much more adapted to the place. No? Also, the culture around old vines, when you see an old vineyard, as the vineyard that you have behind you in your screen, you can see something also related with the storytelling, no? Because it's kind of a mysterious. Each vine is different, and this also is like creates some intrigue, no? But something that is very important is that all vines do not guarantee great wines, and this is something that is very, very important because you can have amazing grapes and you can make very bad wine. But usually this is not the case, because when you have a super old vineyard with very low production, you try to do your best to interpret that vineyard to make the best possible wine. And also it's possible that the job in the vineyard is not done properly, so even you don't have good grapes. So when I did my master of wine, my thesis was related with if real old vines and was something important for the region. And I was doing some questions because more than getting inside these questions and answers is something that I extracted from all these things, is that an old vineyard is not only good because the age, usually is good because of the place where someone planted that many time ago. No? And why? Because usually the vines were planted in Spain in the worst places for growing other things. So when you could plant cereals, you planted cereals or vegetables, and these were usually the flatlands, the places closer to the rivers. However, vines were planted in every other place, probably in hills, in very difficult access places, not very rich soils. Why? Because the vine can survive almost everywhere. And this was the thing. But due to the industrialization, people don't want usually to plant on these days in these places. So when
Fernando, question. You say that the vines were planted in these slopes and hills because of chance. So it was not like people said, okay, we need a good drainage, but they said, you know, we have the fertile land for the oranges and the citrus fruit, and what is left is the slopes for the grapes. So what was the case?
What was the case for what? Sorry, I didn't catch you.
Yeah, I mean, the selection of the site was by chance or by research saying, okay, let's go to the hills because we have no other place left to plant grapes?
I think vines were planted in the poor places because the more fertile places were reserved for other crops, for food. But also, the thing is that probably we still have old vineyards in the hills because as no other thing can be planted there, more or less, you can do also olive trees. People didn't remove that vineyards because every year in Spain, at least, and I think it's worldwide common, people are removing these old plots at the end. Because also we have a very curious thing in Europe, that is the European subsidies helped Europe to remove old vineyards, to plant new vineyards, to be more competitive. And at the end, people removed the vineyards from the slopes, the old vineyards, and with that rights for planting a vineyard, they replanted in the flatlands.
Yes.
So So every time, less and less, we have vineyards in the slopes and in very poor special places or north face places because simply people don't want to work by hand. Because in the slopey places, you need to work sometimes by hand or using a horse to plot. And in the flatlands, usually you can mechanize almost everything. And at the end in Spain, we have a problem is that grapes are usually paid very low. So as you have naturally less production in all vines, and also you need to do that by hand, the price do not justify for the growers to maintain these vineyards. And that's a shame because probably one of the most important things that we have in terms of heritage for the wine industry are old vines. So I think it's a mix. In one hand, the plant, the age of the plant, as we told before, but also is related with the place, with the for sure in these difficult places you don't have irrigation. We have poor soils. Usually we are most exposed to the wine. The slopes are higher, and the aspects sometimes are the worst in the past, that are the north slopes. That for me in Spain, because we have a very high number of sun hours and low rain, the north slopes at this moment with the climate change are the Grand Crus. So in Burgundy, we know that the Grand Crus are the south faces because, or we will see what will happen in the future, but at least traditionally the Grand Crus are south faced because they are in a different latitude and they need the extra sun to ripe, as we know. But in Spain, nobody classified the Grand Crus. And in the past, the people with money, they planted south. And now, for me, the great places are these old vineyards in the slopes in the mountains in the north faces. So why we have old vines? I think we get through this topic, but we can do more organized, no? First thing is that someone did a good job at the moment. Why we have old vineyard? Because someone chose the right rootstock after phylloxera, and they selected the right vinifera. Also, they choose a soil that is suitable for growing a vineyard that can live 100 years. Because I don't know if everybody knows here, but it's very difficult that vineyards planted 30 years ago. I don't think that many vineyards planted 30 years ago are going to be alive for 100 years because they are probably not in the right place. They have been irrigated since the beginning, so the radicular system is on top of the soil. So many the soil sometimes have not enough stones, and they have too much compaction, and sometimes also you have less oxygen, and this is decreasing the potential of aging of the vineyard. And also, to have a whole vineyard, the handling of the vineyard has been done properly. And this is something that is very important. My one goal, apart of making wines, is trying to recover and to save and to record all the knowledge of the people over 75 years old of our village, that they planted some of these vineyards or are the sons of the people who planted these vineyards. Because the next generation, they were in a moment where everything industrialized, they left the village to go to the cities, and they did not the same job that people did previously to create and maintain a vineyard. So the traditional way of growing grapes is almost lost, and we need to save that knowledge, both in the vineyards and also in the winery. And this is something that we are trying to maintain. Also, there are some elements more fortuitous, no, that happen probably not by the hand of the grower. No, first is that they choose the right material, so they have some viruses, but the viruses is not too much, so it creates a balance that is positive for the grapes that we want to pick. Also, it survived to historical episodes. For example, the wars. No, many vineyards have been destroyed during war times, and those that survive are those that we can still recover and grow. Also, personal facts. So, for example, that's very related with lack of profitability, no? Because in these small plots that still are alive are usually that vineyards belong to private people who use that small plots to make their own wines for home, because, as I told you, it's very difficult to transfer the cost of growing grapes in these places to the price that the wineries usually pay the grapes, no? Let's say something, for example, if you receive 50 cents for a kilogram of grapes of young vine, and you receive €1 per 1 kilogram of old vines grapes, at the end, if you are taking, instead of 7 tons per hectare in a young vineyard, you are taking 1 ton per hectare in an old vineyard, you are losing the money.
Yeah.
So this is something that is very relevant. Also, it was soil availability and also the emotions, because the wine and the viticulture always is very related to the emotions. And for example, many people here didn't remove that old vineyard, even if it was not profitable for them, because it was planted by his grandfather. And when you plant a vineyard, you are planting something for the future, because let's think in this: the first 3 years, you are taking almost nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
From the third is a good vintage usually. After that, you have over 4 years that is not so good, and after that it starts to develop. And we can't. So it's like you receive something from your grandfather that planted with his love, so you don't want to remove that, no? And these are elements that make that we have old vineyards today.
That's fascinating, Fernando. Allow me, we have a question from Lefteris, and I think it's a good question to clarify if these old vines, are we talking about grafted vines or Prephyloxera on-rooted vines?
No, we are talking about grafted vines. In Spain, it's very difficult to have ungrafted vines. But for example, Phylloxera came at the end of 18th century to Spain. So for example, the oldest vineyard that we have, it was planted in 1898. So our vineyards of 120, 130 years old, but we don't have usually in Spain, a part of Canary Islands and some part of Toro and Rueda, we don't have Prephyloxera vines. But still our vineyards that for us are kind of very special, because at the end we are making Garnacha wines. We are making 19 different cuvées. We are focusing on vines, but we have vineyards of 25 years old also. And also we are recovering and plant what I told you that nobody's doing of replanting in these old places. We are planting. So, that's
fantastic.
And we make the wines, and the wines of the younger vines are impossible to compare with the wines from the older vines. Okay? So let's talk about a bit of very easy things, of technical facts regarding old vines. So we have no doubt of that in old vines we have a cork moderation, no? Why? Probably because of the senescence, the aging of the subconducts. The conducts is like the humans, no? At the end, due to the pruning or the wrong pruning, sometimes the subflow is lower, and you have a less vigor, no? But for me, what is very, very interesting is the singular vinifera selection. Today, we are buying everything usually in the nurseries, and the nurseries are multiplying clones. This is changing, but mainly the last 30 years planting vineyards, everybody selected a qualitative clone. They multiplied in a nursery, and they put a rootstock, and we planted grafted vines. In the past, people used to go to vineyards that they liked, and in the pruning season, they took what they thought it was best for them, and they usually never use only one vineyard material for only one vineyard. They choose from different places. I did like a kind of muscle selection. But also it's the same with the rootstock, and something very interesting. Almost the 99% of the old vineyards, at least in my region, are not 100% Garnacha, are a blend of things. Mainly are Garnacha, but also they have always some white, and they have, and inside Garnacha, they have very different Garnachas, no? So this makes a unique flavor for a place, and we can make a wine that what we call a field blend, where we have all this vineyard with a unique flavor that produces a wine that is unique in the world. If you are using the same clones with a single grape in all your vineyards, you are decreasing the variability, and for us, I think is more a kind of standardization. It's true that some nurseries in Spain, especially the good ones usually, they are selecting now garnachas, for example, from the different old vineyards. They are multiplying them, and they are selling to you the massal selection. They are not selling you flow, and this is increasing complexity again. In my point of view, what we are doing, we are starting again to replant a vineyard, grafting in field. So with the same material from our vineyards to try to increase the diversity, no? And it's quite interesting thing. So the heterogeneity sometimes is bad if you want to make a more industrialized wine, but it's good if you want to do a unique wine, no? Also, I think everyone agrees is that the adaptation to growing conditions of all vineyards is great, because you have all the radicular system developed. And as we told before, it's not only the age of the vineyard, it's the place where it was planted. No? Something that we have is, as I explained a bit before, is we have a more stable production. Imagine that in the very drought years, this old vineyard, the vine, has so developed the radicular system that they take every drop of water that they have available, and the same with nutrients. So we are seeing less variability in the vintage in old vineyards than in young vineyards. And this is very related to the next point, where we have more stable ripeness. Other important thing is the volume of old wood that we have. And in this old wood, you have more reserves, especially in the starch, and this creates also a more regular maturation. Usually the vine has more resources to restart the next year, and this is something that also impacts in everything. And something before continuing that I know is very related to the next point, is that I was those who believe in the past that all vineyards should have low vigor and produce less, and it was good because it produces smaller grapes and smaller bunches. But I have been in the last 4 years changing my mind and thinking that what we need to do with these vineyards is to recover the old vigor, to try to have bigger grapes and a bit bigger bunches. And this is not a matter of producing more liters per hectare. That is not my goal, never. Is that at the end, we need to have more bigger grapes to have more balanced grapes. Because if you have at the end so small grapes, and in the fourth week of July and the 1st of August, as every year, the climate or is very hot and you have a drought, these small grapes even shrivel, and at the end you have too much concentration, you lose the balance, you have too much sugar, and at the end you are doing high alcohol wines. So we need to work in the vineyards, in these old vineyards, thinking in developing bigger grapes to avoid these problems. How can we do this? We need to increase the production of a bigger canopy. We need to remove in the season, in the green pruning, everything that is going to drink water and you don't need. I mean, if you have more leaves than what you need for ripening a determined amount of grapes. at the end, you have less water for your grapes. So you need to find this balance. And at the end, we are having from all vines grapes that we can pick at 13.5 alcohol with 6 to 7 grams of tartaric per liter, and very, very balanced with ripe grapes, no? And this is something important. Also because along the time of the management of this vineyard, the scars from the old vines are also decreasing the vigor, no? And actually, a very bad pruning can also kill at the end the vineyard. That's why it's so important to learn the respect pruning, you know, the Simonite and Search method that really help us to avoid creating more scars in these old vines. This is something.
May I interrupt a little bit, Fernando? This is fascinating what you're saying. And all this effort, I want just to emphasize what you said, that you're working on recovering the vigor of the vine, producing bigger berries in order to get more balanced, more contemporary wines. And I just wanted to make a repetition for that because I think it is worth saying that again. And it's a take-home message for all of the Greek people in the industry to look deeper into that. So, okay, go on. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's something regarding that thing. I think the days of the big, bold, oaky wines has gone. Yeah. It still has his market, and you can drink fascinating wines coming from this. But if you go to the 60s and 70s to drink wines from that age, the natural alcohol levels were much lower. The ones had higher acidity, and the ones were more fluid. And I think it's not something new, and we are in a moment where people want to drink more balanced wines with less alcohol, more acidity, less oak, and more fruit. So we need, and it's very important, we need to make the grapes necessary to create the styles that we want to create. And this is something very interesting for me. When I taste overripe grapes in vineyards, because we took the wrong decision, at the end, every grape tastes the same. However, when we pick grapes in the right moment, with a single hint of cerebellin, a grape from this vineyard and from the other is super different. And the wines at the end are super different. So for me, you can express much better the terroir, especially from old vineyards, when you pick in the right moment with a bigger grape and at the end in a more balanced style. Because if not, everything tastes black fruit. I have here a small graph where you can see what happened in terms of yields with a vineyard in our region. No? This is a comparative of 2,000 hectares of vineyards, so it's a good graph. So when it's smaller than 5 years old, younger than 5 years old, you are about 8 tons. After that, from 5 to 10, we are in 9 tons. But at the end, when the vineyard is older than 40 years old, we are to 3 tons. For me, my vineyards of 80, 90 years old, we are taking 1 ton per hectare. And we are trying to increase, as I told you, expressed you before. Why sometimes, but all vines are not always good. And all vines have also their problems. And why are these problems? Sometimes the production is so low that it's impossible to be profitable. Why? Because you have so much viruses and fungi, because the soil is super poor. And this is another thing, is that if we have an old vineyard, let's try to fertilize properly with manure or whatever, because at the end, you need to recover the strength of the vineyard. And also, sometimes it's very low production also because it has not been properly managed, the soil weeds and whatever, and you have done a wrong pruning. And sometimes also it happens, but usually I have not seen too much in very old vineyards, because if you have an old vineyard that is even producing bad wine, bad grapes, at the end you remove that, because if it's super costly, so if you need to use a lot of money and time to manage an old vineyard, and the grapes are always bad, you will remove it, no? So sometimes the job was not done properly, and you have a deficient vegetal selection. For example, you choose the wrong variety, the wrong rootstock. You have too much different grapes that the cycle of each one is super different, and it's very difficult to find a moment of picking, or you use grapes that are not adaptable to the climate. For example, in my region, Tempranillo. Someone started to plant Tempranillo in the 50s. Tempranillo is not very good in my region because it's called Tempranillo, that means early. So it's not the best grape adapted to the place, or sometimes the root system can't prospect because you have too thin soil before the mother rock. No? So let me show you, this is a kind of vineyard of what we are talking about. This is a vineyard of 0.4 hectares with 8 different grapes that we know, but we need to do the DNA to know what are actually the grapes. And this is a 65% white grapes, 35 red grapes, and we are producing a field blend with all together, and it's a super interesting style.
Elevation for that?
800 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very nice. And we are doing one kind of these pale reds, because it's red grapes with white grapes, like a kind of clarete, but 100% stems, 100 days maceration with the skins and the stems. So we are doing a serious wine, but in the light spectrum, more or less, no? So it's super floral, it's super mineral, it's very nice. Biggest problem with all vines. The biggest problem with all vines are, as always, that people is lying. It's impossible to make a 5 pound, 8 pound wine with very, very old vines. So the magic words are old vines, alter Reben, viñas viejas, viel vins, viña vecchia, and I don't know how you say in Greek. But
Παλαιά κλίματα. Παλαιά κλίματα.
But as no, it's not regulated, everybody writing the label things to sell the wine, no, like a special selection or whatever. But talking about old vines, I have seen vineyards in the big supermarkets, wines in supermarkets with old vines at $3.99 or £4.99 pounds. Imagine £4.99 if you remove the VAT and you remove the 2.25 pounds of taxes, and the bottle, the cork, the capsule, and the box. At the end, you have 0.3 euros to make the wine and the grapes. Do you think this can come from a 2 tons per hectare vineyard? No.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So we need to regulate. Another thing is to show how the cost of producing a kilogram of old vines is much expensive. Here we are talking about more or less a mean of €1. The cost of production. Imagine if people is selling grapes in the best places here in Aragon, people is selling old vines grapes from €1. They are making no money, and this is the biggest problem. In my vineyards, in the highest cost that I have is in one vineyard, I have a cost of production of €4 per hectare, per kilogram, sorry. So we need to solve this. This is another very nice vineyard. This is a Macabeo planted in 1898. As you can see, this is a place. When you arrive to this place, you have not even tasted the grapes or the wine, but you know that this is a special place, and for sure it's going to produce good wine. And we have never failed doing this. So we decided to create a classification. That is, my thesis was about this, to create a classification for Spain beyond the thing of crianza reserva, gran reserva. That this means nothing apart of the time that the wine has been in the barrels. So we decided to focus in places, and we saw that probably we could do a classification based in the age of the vines. So we were doing research of people who thinking in doing different kind of classification. Burgundy, for example, classifies by the place. The VDP is a private one that classifies also by places. Barossa Old Vines chapter, very interesting, is classifying by the age of the vines, the ancestors and whatever. Viño Cariñán in Chile is a private association that is talking about age of the vines. You need to have Cariñán from old vines of more than X years. So different kinds of classifications, no? Especially these two for me were great. When I did this, the South Africa system of classification for old vines was not even start. So yes. I have this here, but it's super important. And at the end, we created a classification system called 3V classification. So you have the generic of the appellation. After that, you have the 1V, that is like the village level, that is classified wine. Wine in Spanish is vino. That's why the V, classified wine. 2Vs is wine coming from classified vineyards. Vino, the viña, clasificada. At the 3V, the top of the hierarchy, like the Grand Cru, is 3Vs, no? Vino, the viña, vieja, clasificada. Wine coming from a classified old vineyard.
This is official, Fernando, so this is...
No, I tried to... No. This is the result of my thesis. Of my thesis, or my research paper, sorry.
Because I was wondering. Sounds very ambitious.
No, people didn't... so what we are doing is we are thinking to create a association called Save the Old Vines.
Okay.
So a private association with a seal that, with a seal that can classify V1, V2, V3, depending on where you are, where your vineyard is, no? Just before finishing, I'm showing you something that for me is quite interesting, because it's very difficult to know sometimes what's the age of a vineyard, because there were no places where to write that in the late 18th century, for example. Nobody registered that. So what we have found at least is that in Spain, for example, it was a flight of American army, and it took photographs of all the Peninsula Iberica.
Yes.
And this was in 1943, 1957, I think. And we can still see the places. This is my vineyard, Jardín de las Iguales, that is my top vineyard. And we saw where the vines were planted. And thanks to this, as we want to recover the proudness of this valley, we could bought all the valley, and we are starting to put the vines again exactly where they were in the past, because we have only 1.7 hectares of the historical vineyard, and we have 11 hectares more that we are replanting some parts, and the other we are maintaining the olive trees, and to create a whole valley of Garracha. And so this is more or less what I wanted to say you. I hope you have found interesting, and I'm not very organized, so sometimes I am jumping.
No, actually you are very organized, and I found a lot of interesting things. I'm pretty sure that we need to watch that again, and we will watch it in YouTube. Fernando, can I have one last question before we move on? Are old vines protected in any way in Spain?
No.
Actually, this is the biggest problem, that people continue removing old vineyards. I bet for this, in 10 years, there won't be enough old vineyards for everybody. Because as everybody is removing old vineyards, and some of us, because we are lots of people now recovering old vineyards, this is going to be like a gem in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, nobody is protecting that. And I think it's quite important.
Yeah, and it's time now to start thinking about that. Fernando, thank you very much. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. It was fascinating, and thank you for being part of the first 50 Great Greek Wines Conference.
Gracias. Thank you very much for taking.
Have a great Sunday. Thank you.
Adiós.